My assigned poem was London 1802, written by William Wordsworth. Milton, thou shouldst be living at this hour. England hath need of thee. She is a fen of stagnant waters, altar, sword, and pen. Fireside, the heroic wealth of hall and bower have forfeited their ancient English dower of inward happiness. We are selfish men. Oh, raise us up, return to us again, and give us manners, virtue, freedom, power. Thy soul is like a star, and dwelt apart. Thou hadst a voice whose sound was like the sea, pure as the naked heavens, majestic, free. So didst thou travel in life's common way, in cheerful godliness, and yet thy heart the lowliest duties on herself did lay. This poem is considered an Italian sonnet because it consists of 14 lines and is written in iambic pentameter. This poem has an octet and a sestet. The octet consists of 8 lines with the rhyming system of A, B, B, A, B, B, A. And the sestet consists of 6 lines at the end of the poem that follows the rhyming system C, D, D, E, C, E. The tone of the speaker seems very unhappy and critical in the beginning of the poem during the entire octet. Then when he reaches the sestet, he becomes more of a praising of this Milton. I did research on who this Milton was that Wordsworth was talking about in this poem, and I've come to the conclusion that the Milton that was being talked about is John Milton, who was a very famous poet in England. He is famous for writing his epics called Paradise Lost and a sequel to that of Paradise Regained. As you can see, I used this website, poets.org, to research John Milton. Now, there are many literary devices in this poem. This poem consists of a metaphor on line 3 to 4, a fen of stagnant waters, where Wordsworth is comparing England to a fen of stagnant waters, which is essentially like a swamp or a place with very dirty or muddy water. So he's comparing England to some dark and dank place that is very abysmal and unhappy. He uses various similes to praise Milton, and Milton he apostrophizes various times, uses him refers to him many times throughout this poem. He uses this line, "Thy soul was like a star," to compare John Milton's soul to a star. He also uses, "Thou hadst a voice whose sound was like the sea," and "pure as the naked heavens, majestic, free." He uses these lines to describe John Milton's voice of very calming like the sea, and very flowing, and very pure and straightforward as the heavens, or very clear as the heavens, and majestic and free, as he says in this poem. He also uses personification upon John Milton's heart. He uses these lines, "And yet thy heart the lowliest duties on herself did lay." Now he is personifying Milton's heart by laying the lowliest duties on itself and comparing it and calling it herself, as if the heart was a living being, where it is a living being but has its own conscience. And by comparing Milton's heart and describing it as herself, it is considered personification. Now, there were a few words that I did not know in the beginning of this, when the first time I read this poem. These words were fen, bower, and dower. I looked these words up on dictionary.com, and I found that fen is a low land covered wholly or partially with water, or boggy land or a marsh, which refers back to England being a fen of stagnant waters, or a boggy marsh of stagnant waters, which adds to the image that he tries to portray, it being very abysmal and unhappy. Bower is a leafy shelter or recess. It's a rustic dwelling or a cottage, and sometimes it's used as a lady's boudoir in a medieval castle. And as you can see, he uses bower here in the heroic wealth of hall and bower. Another word that I didn't know was dower, which I found to be the portion of a deceased husband's real property allowed to his widow for her lifetime. Or, as one of the definitions that I did not put in, was something that a woman had to pay a man of a dowry to be married to him. And he uses dower in the line, have forfeited their ancient English dower of inward happiness. I will read this poem one more time to get a better feel for it. The poem is called London, 1802. Milton, thou shouldst be living at this hour. England hath need of thee. She's a fen of stagnant waters, altar, sword, and pen. Fireside, the heroic wealth of hall and bower, have forfeited their ancient English dower of inward happiness. We are selfish men. Oh, raise us up, return to us again, and give us manners, virtue, freedom, power. Thy soul was like a star, and dwelt apart. Thou hadst a voice whose sound was like the sea, pure as the naked heavens, majestic, free. So didst thou travel in life's common way, in cheerful godliness, and yet thy heart the lowliest duties on herself did lay. This poem could have a few themes, and as we have previously seen in some of Wordsworth's previous poems, he likes to incorporate nature into his poems. And in this one he did just that by incorporating fen of stagnant waters and comparing London, or England, to the stagnant waters. Now, the title of the poem could mean various things. What I believe it means is the poem is where it was written, in London during 1802.